After lunch, and the turnout is wonderful. Today we're going to talk about Windows Phone 8 and how to test Windows Phone 8 applications. My name is Jorge Orchilles. Usual disclaimer, I am not speaking on behalf of my company. Anything I say or do should not be held against me in any court of law. I'm not really giving you much code, I'm just going to tell you how to do things. So I run the vulnerability assessment team at a major financial down in Fort Lauderdale. I have a master's of science in management information systems from FIU. I wrote a book because I had too much time on my hands. Have a few certs. I teach SANS. Anyone staying for SANS next week? No one? 508, 504, I'll be TAing that one with John Strand. I'm the director of the South Florida ISSA and around the community, helping out. So let's get started. Microsoft does have a phone. Hopefully all of you now know that. Their marketing campaign has been pretty good. Good song to it too. So it's called Windows Phone 8, or WP8 is how we refer to it. It used to be called Windows Mobile way back in the day, if anyone remembers that. It was the smartphone before the smartphones came, before Apple and all that. They rebranded to Windows Phone on 7, and their latest 8.1 is actually coming out. I saw some of the latest Nokia stuff coming out. They're actually pretty nice phones, nicely built phones. Windows Phone 8 was released in 2012. They use the same hardware architecture as iOS, Android, and BlackBerry, right? In the ARM architecture. So whenever you do get to the point where you're trying to write an exploit, that you kind of need to know assembly and ARM to do that. And that's why it's important. So a Windows exploit that you might get working right now is for an x86 architecture and won't work on this. And that is important as we get into the point that there's no jailbreak and why. Microsoft actually did something pretty smart here. Windows Phone uses a runtime application architecture. So if you develop on Windows 8, the operating system, you can easily port it over to Windows Phone 8 and vice versa. So that is one of the reasons that they advertise that their App Store has, I don't know how many thousand apps they're saying now, over like 300,000 apps, and it's not really true. It's Windows apps that they're porting over, or even mobile sites that they're porting over. And most importantly, it does run the Windows NT kernel. That's very important from a security perspective. So you guys do know Windows NT back in the day. That kernel that was introduced in that server hardware is now being used on their phone. So before we hack anything, we really need to understand it. And before you hack any application, any mobile application, you need to understand the platform it works on. So how this came about for me is I got an app put on my desk saying, you need to test this and certify and make sure that none of our company information is going to leak out onto the operating system. I said, wait a minute, Windows Phone, I didn't even know. This is the first time I even see a Windows Phone. All right, let's try to apply the same methodology that we used on iOS, on Android, and it simply doesn't work. And that's where this research started. The platform's completely different. Was the first thing we spent most of our time researching, understanding how that platform works, and then figuring out how to test it. And if you go and Google this, you don't find it. So really this entire presentation is going to introduce Windows Phone 8 and then introduce how to test the apps. Because if you currently go out there, even OWASP doesn't have this. I'm actually thinking of submitting all of this documentation to them so you can skip those 80 or so hours I spent trying to figure this out and just get to testing the app. With that said, all of this I have documented on my blog, so I will provide the slides afterwards, but all of this goes much more in depth with actual commands you need to run, step-by-step instruction on how to do all of this. So if I go through the slides a little quicker, just kind of check what you want to come back to, and all of that, I'll provide that link at the end. So real big on the platform is that it uses NT kernel. And that introduced a whole lot of security to it. First of all, it uses BitLocker. BitLocker is full disk encryption. You can do it on your laptop right now. You lose your laptop, as long as it's not powered on, no one can access it unless they know the password, right? That's how full disk encryption works. Same is true for this phone. So think about it from the security perspective. You lose your phone, you have a pin on it, you're not going to be able to boot it or even access the hard drive on it because it's encrypted. So that's the first step. And when you start thinking of, all right, I want to jailbreak this thing, Let me look at the file system. You can't look at it from an offline perspective because you need to decrypt it or view it from a decrypted state. Next, the file system. It's using the NT file system as well. A lot more security there over FAT32 and some of the older file systems we used. It has sandboxed apps. What does that mean? That means that one app can have very limited communication with the other. So even if you do pop an app, you find a vulnerability, you can exploit it on that app, you're not going to get anywhere else. You're barely going to be able to talk to another app, and you're sure as hell not going to be able to talk to any of the core operating system. It has safe boot, and this is even the hardest part. So Microsoft makes the operating system, Nokia will make the actual phone, right? When they're making the phone, there's a TPM chip on there, and they hard code the key that is required to access the boot. And if that key doesn't match, the device is not going to boot at all. So even then, even if you do take your Windows phone right now and just delete the entire hard drive because it's encrypted, you can't do anything with it, you're not going to be able to boot it. And that's another issue. And with TPM2, they actually hard-coded this onto the chip itself, and no one's been able to break this. And then lastly, any binary that runs has to be signed by Microsoft. So, you know, Microsoft tries to control everything, and they've picked out a very good way to do that on Windows Phone 8. So Windows Phone 8 also has chambers, a trusted computing base and a least privileged chamber. Do I need this microphone? Like, can I step away? Everyone hears me? Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, so there's two chambers. One where the kernel is, if you remember operating system basics, right? Every operating system has a kernel. That kernel is operating in its own chamber. And then you have a least privileged chamber, and that's where all your services and your apps are working. Ideally, you want to be able to get to the kernel, right? Whether you're doing something malicious, you want to get a jailbreak or something, you want to talk to the kernel. That's something that has been blocked off by Microsoft using these chambers. They have capabilities. These different capabilities are the different actors creating. You have Microsoft, who has full system privileges. They can debug anything. They have access to APIs like SMS. They have APIs for the SIM to talk with the SIM. They actually have over 350 different APIs where they can talk directly to a kernel, directly to a system. Then they have another chamber where the developers work. This is where Nokia is, right? This is where Samsung is. This is where the developers are, where they can talk to the cell phone API, right? Or they can do some device management. And lastly, you have the developer, and that's as far as we've been able to get. Actually, no. I'm going to show you how to get to developer today so that you have access to all of this. And if you really want to go deeper, there is access to kind of become an OEM like Nokia and have access to a few more APIs. But you're still not there, right? You're still not at system. As a developer, and this is where you're going to interact mostly with it, you have access to the network, right? Whether it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever, the actual cell network, you have access to that. You have access to a camera, to an NFC, to SD cards, to the wallet, to speech recognition, to a front camera. Everything you would need as an app developer to get an app to work correctly. As far as sandboxing, I mentioned this one. Each app has its own storage, and it's very limited what you can do from one to the other. But each app, so within each app, it has its own little folder, and that's exactly how it looks at when you look at it. We'll look at it in a bit. Where you have your settings, you have your files, you have your directories, your database. It uses SQLite just like your other mobile platforms. And it's all in this little folder. If you pop an app again, or if you have full control of your app, say you're a developer, you create a malicious app, you only have access to your app directories. You cannot get and see some other app's directory. So Windows Phone 8 is closed. There is no jailbreak yet. If anyone is really interested in it, you know, it'll come just like any other one, but it's pretty tough, right? It wasn't as simple as Android, for instance, and even Apple, probably because of the amount of people using it. And just to show of hands, how many people actually have a Windows Phone? One person. Awesome. That's about the percentage. Yeah, exactly. It's actually a very secure phone if that's your thing. So there's no jailbreak. So some activities, how many people have done mobile app testing before on Android? All right, a few of you. Some of the things you want when you're testing an Android app or an iOS app or even a BlackBerry app is you want to have access to a memory. Here, you're not, right? You don't have that. It's a chamber that you don't have access to. You can't see the local file system, you can't see the local storage, and you can't transfer files from and to the device wherever you want. You only can transfer them pretty much to SD card. So all of these things are limitations. So how the heck are we going to test an app when we can't do half the things we traditionally do? And that's where we're heading at. But let's take a break before that and think of what a jailbreak would look like. Theoretically, it would need to exploit a vulnerability, one vulnerability. If that vulnerability you're exploiting should be on an app that's running a system, Internet Explorer maybe the Bluetooth communication, like the actual firmware on it, the actual communication there, I don't know. Something running a system, find an exploit, find a vulnerability, and exploit it. We know for Internet Explorer we have these. We have exploits for IE10, we have exploits for IE11. The problem is that since this is a different architecture, if you recall how a use after free vulnerability works or any type of exploit works, you need to get back in memory, know where you are in memory to be able to continue your code and execute your code. You can't do this here because you can't look where you are in memory. There's no way to access the memory, and that's the main issue. If you were able to access memory, you could probably use one of these exploits to get through. And once you do get through, then you have all this defense in depth. So great, you have your exploit, you do it on a client side, right? Something that has access to system. It's probably not going to be running with system, so you may need to escalate privileges, depends on what process you're owning. Then you might only have owned that phone for that moment, right? Because as soon as it reboots, it has secure boot. Remember the whole digital signature, the TPM, all that? You're going to have to bypass that if you want it to be, an ongoing jailbreak. And then, if you want to run your own application, you're going to have to somehow disable its code signing signature or create a trusted app store. So it's pretty tough. We know there's exploits, we just can't get code to actually execute. So if you run the exploit, you'll kill IE, it'll just crash because it ends up looking for something in memory and you have no idea where you are. So what can we actually test here? Well, your task is to test a mobile app. So you can test that particular application's logic. You can see what communication, where that app is communicating to, so what server is it going to. Most of these communicate over web protocols, over HTTP, some go over SSL, etc. You can try that, and if you find out where it's going and how it's authenticating, you can even try it from your web browser or from your traditional tools. You could put a proxy in the area, etc., and test the server side. You could test the client side of that app. So even on the client side, if say you can inject something that's coming back from the server, you somehow intercept it and add more code there, you might be able to find a flaw on the client and exploit that particular client. You exploit that particular app, awesome, you'll probably get full access to that app because remember, every app is sandboxed. So you have a client-side vulnerability, you exploit the particular app, you get access to that. If it's a financial, if it's a key pass or something storing your password, maybe you'll have access to a file system. You can look at the local application storage, and I'm going to show how to do that, but it does require the SAP file. And the SAP file is pretty much a zip file with DRM that I'll talk about shortly. That's pretty much the app file. So you need to tell the developer, hey, I'm testing your app. If I don't test it, we're not going to put it in production and we're not going to buy your services. Generally, it does require that much leverage for them to give you this, and then they have to give it to you without the encryption. Because the first time I told them that, they're like, oh, sure, we'll give you the app. I look at it, I'm like, dude, this is encrypted. Give me the unencrypted app. They finally budged, and I was able to do the test. And lastly, you can look at the configuration of that local application. So a bit limited for those of you that have tested other mobile apps. It's not ideal, but this is what you can do, right? You're tasked with it, you need to get your task accomplished as best as you can. Any questions about the platform before we go on? I just asked that question so I can have a drink. All right, prereqs, what do you need? You need either a physical device, and this is what a physical device looks like, because apparently none of you have one, right? This is a Nokia Lumia. The camera on it is awesome. And that's pretty much the awesomeness there. If you don't have this, you can still test mobile apps. You can use an emulator, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm not going to do it here because I always prefer to test on an actual device. There's a few differences, I'll cover those. But even if you don't have it, you can go home right now for free, download this emulator, and put an app in and start looking at what the app does. And no one is doing this. So if you find stuff, which last night I was just messing around with one, and I found another issue on a Bing financial app that I'll show you guys in a minute. You know, no one's doing it, so go out and do it. There's so many vulnerabilities. It's like industrial control systems. Why have all these people found these vulnerabilities? Because no one's looking at them. As soon as you get 10 guys that know what they're doing to look at them, you find all these vulnerabilities. So, I mean, as enterprises go to this, you might want to start checking it out. If you are using a device, you have to unlock it. So I'll show you how to do that in this talk. We'll talk about the SAT file and why you really need it. And we'll talk about an HTTP proxy, which will allow you to see a lot of the traffic going back and forth. So physical or emulator, I always prefer physical. Like I said, this is a Nokia Lumia. I requested this. They said, you need to test this app. I said, you got to give me a device. And they said, well, use an emulator. I said, no, you got to give me a device. And I got a free phone. You can use the emulator. Some things about the emulator you should know. First of all, it's a Hyper-V image. So anyone use Hyper-V, you have to do that on Windows. So it goes without saying, you need a Windows system to do that. Not only that, you actually need a Windows 8 system, 64-bit to do that. We figured out how to do it on Windows 7 64-bit. I have the write-up on my blog if you want to figure it out. Just get a Windows 8. I mean, it's so much trouble to go through to get it working. But it's a Hyper-V image, right? So it's a virtual machine. We know that. Instead of using ARM architecture, it's going to use x86. So even if you do find a vulnerability for it, and you write this awesome exploit that works on your emulator, that exploit is not going to work on the phone because the phone uses a different hardware architecture, right? All the binaries are fake. And by fake, I mean they're fake. Like, it says fake. Their name are fake LED, fake modem, fake everything. So everything's fake. There are these DLL files that I don't think exist on the phone. I don't know because I can't look at the phone, but I doubt they're called fake on the phone as well. The user agent. So when you go on your IE browser, you go to a site, you know, it says, hey, I'm using Internet Explorer 10 and I'm a Windows phone, and I'll show you guys that. This phone will tell anyone that you're using Windows Phone 8. Microsoft's very proud of that. But when you use it on the emulator, it's going to use a different user agent. And lastly, you cannot get apps from the App Store and put it on your emulated phone. So if the vendor is not giving you a SAT file, then there's nothing you can do. You can't actually go to the store and pull down a file. You have to get the file from the vendor, or you can use XDA developers. They put up a bunch of SAT files up there, and you can start messing around with those. But really, to test it, if it's going to be a vendor app, they need to provide you the SAT file, and you should use a actual device. So next steps is to install your Windows Phone SDK. This is free. It's at dev.windowsphone.com. It does require Windows 8 64-bit. Don't start, be like, oh, I need a Windows machine, and then install 32-bit, because when you go to install this, you're going to fail, and you're going to be like, damn, I have to install another operating system, blah, blah, blah. If you're using a virtual machine, you do need to make a little change. This killed me. This probably took like 2 days to figure out. You need to set your hypervisor.cpu.v0 equal to false, and this is in the .vmx file. So if you're using VMware, you're using your Windows 8 machine as a virtual machine, you have to do this. If not, it's not going to work, and you're going to be like, what the hell is not working? There you go. This should save you some time. And then in the control panel, you go and you turn on Hyper-V, then you download it, you install it, and you have an emulator. It does come with Visual Studio Express 2012. Remember, as an SDK, you're trying to develop apps. They don't know you're trying to break apps, so it is going to come with Visual Studio, and you could probably even code your own app. So let me show you real quick what that looks like. All my demos are going to fail now because this went to sleep. It's going to pull a different IP address. I'm going to have to reconfigure everything. It's all right. That's why we do live demos. So this is my virtual machine. I am running a Mac 8.1 with 64-bit. I don't want you scanning the network. I'll show you that later. All right, here you go. So this little emulator here, you look at it, it runs exactly where I told you. Microsoft program files x86, Microsoft KDE 8.0, and I'll show you what it looks like when you boot it, but I'm not going to wait for it to boot because it takes forever, especially on a virtual machine. There you go, you have your phone, and of course I'm on a very small screen, so you can't even see the whole phone, but the phone starts booting. And I don't have an IP address, so it's throwing out errors. But I need an IP, so let's figure that out. I do have an IP. What are you talking about? Or I don't. Hopefully I got an IP. I'm still connected here. Yeah. All right, so that's your emulator. If you have a physical device, you need to unlock it. You have to pay for this. Yeah. But I figured out a way to pay $19. You say you're a student. Now, of course you're students. You're learning. I'm a student. So you need the physical device. You have to unlock it. If you don't unlock it, you're not going to be able to sideload the SAP file that was provided to you by the person you're testing or the developer. So you do have to unlock it. Join the dev program. It's $19 and it'll allow up to 3 sideloaded apps. I really don't use this app with my phone, so I don't care if I only test 3 apps at a time. Other people may, so you can pay $99 a year for a dev account. You can have 10 sideloaded apps, or, and this is what I was looking at, say you're a company, which is state of Florida, is very simple to register, right? Sunbiz.org, fill out a paper, pay like $30, you're a company. Then request Microsoft to give you a digital certificate for your enterprise app store, and you become, you can start putting out more than 10 apps. So that's if you're really into it. You register for free, or for $19 on dev.windowsphone.com. So the SAP file, if you look at it, its signature is the same as a Silverlight app. It contains a XML file called app.manifest, and that defines the assemblies and DLLs that get deployed. Let me show you an app here. So let's not pick on too many people. So this webaccess.sap file is a SAP that I got from the XDA developers. You unzip it, and then in here you have your app.manifest file. If you look at that with a text editor, you'll see here exactly what it's going to deploy. So you're already starting to learn what this app does, or what it's deploying, at least when you send it. So there's a webaccess.dll, http server.dll, file system registry, etc. So you can see that for any file that's not encrypted. So this is something Microsoft does that's very different than Android and iOS. When you download from the store, you have to be logged in, and it takes your cookie and uses your cookie in the DRM encryption. So it's rendered real time as you pull the app down. That makes it very difficult for you to reverse the app, right? So if you're a coder, you're a developer, you don't want people looking at your source code, this is excellent. You know, there's no way that even someone that's legitimately downloading this is going to end up reversing this. I think eventually we will. Just like any other DRM, we figure the way around it. I just don't think that many people are looking into this to figure it out, but there'll be a way to reverse. Right now, there isn't, so that's good for the developers. You can't actually see the source code or anything like that. So what do? You request the file from the developers, and that's exactly the couple files I have. To know if there's DRM or no DRM, you can, it's just a zip file. So if you open it with a text editor, so both of these are SAP files. The top left one is a web access which I got from the developer, and the right one is Bank of America, which I got from the store. You can see that the left one starts with PK. What does that mean? It's a zip file, right? PK stands for Phil Katz, the author of PK zip, and that's how you know it's a zip file. So that's the easiest way just to get an app, open it with text, and know if there's DRM or not. Once you have it, you have to load it onto your app, onto your phone. So we're going to go and do a live demo. Pretty much side loading, like I mentioned, is getting the app from the developer and side loading it onto your phone. You're not getting it from the official store. So you can use the SDK or you can use Windows Phone Power Tools. I'm going to show you how Windows Phone Power Tools works. It's free online, just search for it or go to my blog and get the exact link for it. You do need to have it connected to the machine. So it's not going to connect if it's not connected. It's via USB if no one's seeing. There is USB there. Connect to device. And here you can actually pull up your emulators as well. So even if you get the SAP file from the developer, you can put it into an emulator. That will work. But I'm going to connect to the device, make sure the device is unplugged, plugged in, and no pin. Is it connecting? Yes. Live demo 1 worked. All right, so here you can pull whatever app file you have. So let me show you one that I got from a vendor. Just show you how to install it. You click install, and it'll all of a sudden pop up in my wonderful tiles. Yes, you can't see, but it's now on my tiles. You could go here to Dev Apps and see your apps. I have a 3 limit account, so these are the 2 I have on there. One is a web server, and the other is a good app. And then you could come down here and look at its internal storage. It won't have much storage until you run the app, and Windows Phone Power Tools has a bug. The bug is that once you install it, you look at the isolated storage, nothing's showing up, right? Even if I open the app, it's opening. I'm hitting setup, I'm accepting a user agreement. I go back here, and there's still nothing there, right? So you say, oh, something didn't work, I can't see anything. You can, and you just have to do a very Microsoft thing. Close Power Tools and start it again. Then it works. So we'll show local storage shortly. That was an example of side loading the app. So far, so good, pretty easy, right? You get the SDK, you get a phone, you get the SAP, you put the SAP on the device, you're good to go, we're ready to test. Intro's over, everyone's with me? Awesome. All right, so we're gonna start testing this app. Methodology for testing. I went straight off of mobile app testing, right? I wanted to implement this as closely as I could to testing mobile apps that I do know how to test, like iOS. So you start, and in any ethical hack, I would hope, you start with information gathering. You really need to understand what you're testing, right? So you already figured out what the platform was. Now you need to understand what the heck this app does. What is it that you're testing? What's the point of it? Most of this you can accomplish beforehand, before you even get the app. You look up the vendor, you ask them, you can go through scoping questions. You say, what's the point of this app? What does it do? What's it hold? Do I need to authenticate? What do I get access to? Etc. Then, once you do that phase, you start with your dynamic analysis. And dynamic means actually using the app, right? You start using the app, you see what requests it's making, what requests it's receiving, how it's interacting, etc. All of that testing is considered dynamic. Then, if you have the source code in a raw format, you can analyze it. You can do source code review. That's called static analysis. I am not that far yet on here. I know some tools to decompile, and I'm probably going to leave you off with that at the end, given the time as well. But that would be the 3rd phase. The information gathering and dynamic, you can definitely start right now with those $19 you paid as a dev. All right, so first steps of any assessment, understand what you're testing. You got your app, installed, whether it's side-loaded or an emulator, you got it from the store or wherever, and then figure out how the app works. What are the steps here? Very simple. Navigate through the application. Like any web app you're gonna test, like any other application you're gonna test, just go through it. Click around, make sure you click everything, start seeing what it does. Start asking questions. Does this app have a settings? What kind of settings are there? What can I configure? What can I look at? See what network interfaces are used. Is it using the SIM? Is it using your carrier? Is it using Wi-Fi? Does it use Bluetooth? Does it do a VPN connection? All of that you're gonna need to know before you start testing, right? This is all information gathering. Does the application take any input? Is that input sensitive? Does it access any sensitive information, right? So you can take a financial app as a primary example here. It does take your input. That input is normally sensitive, right? Your username or your password, maybe a two-factor authentication, and then you're accessing something sensitive like your bank account or your credit card statement, etc. Not all apps are financial, so you can go through those as well, but all questions to ask. Does the application perform transactions? Do you have in-app purchases? Does it have credit card transactions? Is it storing the credit card on its own? Think of like the Square app or this new coin payment card. Did anyone see that? That's gonna be awesome. All of that's gonna be on the app. You're gonna take pictures of your credit card, scan your credit card, and it's all gonna be saved on your app on your phone. It's gonna be great. What other components are used? Does it interact with your contact list, with calendars, with camera, with location, etc.? And you can even do some outside recon, see if anyone has tested this app before. Like I said, this is a very new thing. Enterprises are looking at it because the phone, as you saw, is actually pretty secure. So they're using it as BYOD or even as deployments to not deploy BlackBerry anymore. So this is going to grow, but not that many people are doing it. I do challenge you and ask that you go and test out all the apps. I mean, just running an HTTP proxy and looking at what some of these apps are doing, you're finding vulnerabilities. It's that bad right now. So even in the information gathering stage, you can find some vulnerabilities, right? When you started the app, you put your username and your password, and then it cached that, and every time you open it, it's logging in. That, in my opinion, would be a problem. It should have a passcode, right? You can identify that right off the bat just by using it. You have done nothing else except understand what you're using. If it does have a passcode, say Dropbox, right? You set up Dropbox once, and then every time you have it, it's just syncing, right? And every time you open the app, it has access to your stuff. Set up a passcode. Does that passcode meet or follow any good practices? Obviously, not much follows good password policies, so you'll probably find this one. And then lastly, is it caching things? So you use the app on the internet, you go to your bank account, you disconnect all your network, you go back to the app. Is it keeping your account there? If it is, then you know it's caching your information locally without even having tested it, right? Everyone got that? So you go in, you see everything, you turn off. And in this point, I do that. I turn off, I put this on airplane mode, and then I enable one network device at a time. So I want to make sure I'm seeing all the traffic going in and out. There are apps that will use both Wi-Fi and cell. So you have your cell signal on, you're not looking at it, and you're sending Wi-Fi, and you're like, where is this authenticating? Why isn't this, all of a sudden I'm logged in, what's going on? It's sending authentication through the cell API instead of through the Wi-Fi. So dynamic testing, this is our next step. Most apps are going to use HTTP or HTTPS to communicate. So you use an HTTP proxy. I'm going to show you how to set that up. And if it's HTTPS, I'll show you how to install your own certificate so you don't get the invalid cert error, or if they're using any sort of certificate validation, it'll validate it and you'll see even the encrypted traffic. Now, the problem lies when they're not using HTTP. So your first thing is going to see, most of the time it's going to be HTTP. If it's not, then there's a challenge, because you need a man in the middle of this. So there's different ways to do that. One, you set up your access point, right? A little wireless access point that you have. And you just tell it to send all the traffic that you send to this IP, send it to me as well. You set up your network and sniffing, you'll get all the traffic, but you're not gonna get anything encrypted, right? Well, you'll get it encrypted, you're just not gonna know what it is. You're only gonna see the clear text and be able to make sense of it. You can use Mallory. How many of you have heard of Mallory? Mallory does something very similar. It will set up the access point for you, and you connect to it, and then it bridges out to the internet, and man in the middle is everything, including SSL. But Mallory has only two ways of functioning, an access point or through VPN. And this is one of my larger complaints here to Microsoft is you have released an enterprise phone and it doesn't have VPN capabilities. There's no VPN settings on this. You want a VPN anywhere, you can. There's no VPN. You can only do HTTP proxy. And I have a problem with that as well. All of these have been reported to Microsoft. They're coming out with 8.1 in the next few weeks or months, I don't know. They try to surprise you, but supposedly they're gonna be fixed there. Lastly, if you don't have access to your access point, you can just ARP poison it, right? It's using IPv4, use ARP, that's it, you'll get all the traffic, but again, you're not gonna be able to see much of the encrypted traffic. So how to set up an HTTP proxy. You go, and this is a screenshot of Windows Phone 8, if any of you haven't seen it. You go to your wireless connection, and there's a little thing that says proxy on or off. You turn it on, you put your server URL and the port number, and it connects. Notice that there's no authentication. Again, this is a phone for enterprises. Enterprises have proxies. Proxies require authentication. This phone, made for the enterprise, does not allow you to authenticate to a proxy. Don't understand. But let's show you how that works. And now you see traffic. So let's do this live. Hopefully my connections are still up. So make sure my phone is on. And it's not on the wireless, is it? Oh, it's coming back. Google.com. So this is SAP proxy. Anyone have experience with an HTTP proxy? Show of hands. Come on, you see more hands than that. All right. So an HTTP proxy will pretty much intercept your requests, send it off to the web server for you, intercept the response, and send it back to the phone. So you go here to local proxy. You tell it listen on this port. So listen on 192.168.1.10. Connect to port 80. That's the same thing you're going to set up on this screen. On this screen, same, obviously it's not the same IP because it's a screenshot, but that's where you set up. So your phone is going to go to your machine, from the machine to the internet, and then back. When you set that up, and obviously my network connection is dead, thankfully I have some cached pages here, it should work. So you start seeing traffic. This was me going to google.com with the phone, I believe. Oh, look at that. This is what I was telling you about the user agent. So on Internet Explorer on my phone, I went to google.com. You can see the request going out. Go to google.com. Look at the user agent. It tells everyone, I'm on Internet Explorer 10, I'm a Windows Phone 8, and I'm actually a Lumia 920. I'm surprised it doesn't say what color my phone is. But it pretty much tells you everything, right? It's telling exactly what it is. It's on ARM, IE mobile, you know, it's all there for you. So now you can see traffic. You start using the app, you send traffic, you receive traffic. Wonderful, you can see if it's HTTP. All of this is HTTP traffic. For HTTPS, you need to install your signature. So you have to generate the SSL certificate and then somehow get it on your device. Let me show you how to generate a certificate. You go here to Tools, Options, you go to Dynamic Certificate. This is your certificate, save it, and then you need to transfer it onto your phone. This was the other place where I just didn't connect dots. There's app sandboxing. You need this cert to be installed on the system. So you can't use any app that isn't system app. I spent some time on that because you'd figure that SkyDrive, which is provided by Microsoft, would have access to the system. It does not. So if you save it on your SkyDrive and then you go in and fetch it, you'll see the certificate, but you won't be able to install it. The Mail app does have system access. So if you email the certificate to yourself and then open it up on your email, then you can install the certificate. If you go with Internet Explorer to the certificate, so you host it on a web server, you go there, then you can access it. You can transfer it through USB, but the easiest way was to host it on your web server. This is what it looks like, and this was my final issue, and this one was my worst one with them, was that it's very easy to install the certificate. So as soon as you browse to it, you click install and it installs. Then, if you realize, oh, I don't want this certificate installed anymore, let me remove it, there's no functionality for it. You can't see what certificates you've accepted or someone else has accepted on your behalf on your phone. And you can't, even if you do and you say, all right, I temporarily want to accept this certificate because I really need to check my email, you can't remove it afterwards. So there's no certificate management. This was my third issue with Microsoft. So how do you get this? And this is more real life and I don't document this, but if you wanted someone to connect and get your digital certificate, you set up a wireless access point, everyone connects to it, and the first request that they send, whatever GET request, you give them the certificate file. And by giving them the certificate file, they're going to see this, and you can change whatever name it says right here. So you can change that to hit install to access free Wi-Fi. And that could be the name of your certificate. And then they're going to hit install, and they're not going to get any certificate error the rest of their life until that certificate expires. So you can man in the middle of them anywhere you want later on, and there's no way for them to remove that. So this was another issue. So at the end, you now have access to SSL traffic. So let me show you a page here. So this is the finance app. You see HTTPS. I can actually see the request, and apparently I can't see the response on that one. Go live demos. All right. Wow, none of my live demos have failed yet. This is epic. And there you can see the response. It's supposed to be all over HTTPS, right? Normally you wouldn't see it. You see HTTPS there, but you do because the certificate was installed on the phone. So far, so good. Now, if you are on the emulator, because I know none of you have phones and you're going to go home and try this with the emulator, the VM, remember, the Windows Phone emulator is a virtual machine on your Windows 8, which will probably be a virtual machine too because you wouldn't run that as your primary operating system, right? So you have a VM going through a VM going through a VM. You're already a man in the middle, right? It's all going through that Windows 8 virtual machine. So whatever proxy you set up on that Windows 8 machine will automatically replicate over to the phone. So that's a simpler one. You just go to Internet Options, go to Proxy, set the proxy of your own machine, and that's it. You don't even have to set it up on the phone, which is nice. So at this point, you've gone through the app, you've seen the traffic, you've seen what you're sending, what you're receiving. It's beautiful. You have network traffic. We go back to information gathering, and everyone tells you this in any ethical hacking class. They say, you know, at any given time you're going to go back to information gathering, but they don't really tell you what, how, or why. This is why. So now that you know what's going on, can you determine anything about the server-side application? Where is it hosted? You know, it's going to some domain. Where's that domain? Is it a cloud service? Is it Amazon? Is it a shared service? Is it using rack space? Where's it hosted? What development environment is it? You know, what's it pulling? Is it pulling JSPs? Right? It's Java. Is it pulling ASPs? You know, you learn a lot about the environment just by being able to see this traffic now. Is it using any sort of authentication APIs, any sort of single sign-in? Is it using any other APIs? Is it using the Maps API? Is it using a payment gateway? Is it using SMS? Now that you have visibility of all this traffic, you can now do a lot more. And this is where your triggers for, all right, let me go test the server side now, should be going off. Once you find this, this server side, this web app, go through it, right? Apply the same web application testing methodology that you currently use to the same thing. You might have to send it a special user agent, right, to get the mobile site, but that's the most security I've seen about it. It's, you know, it's out there, it's on the internet, it has to be accessible, so you can access it from your own machine without a problem. So what vulnerabilities can we find so far? Encryption not enforced. This is probably the easiest one. You have a username and a password going in clear text. You can sell this in any organization very easily. You have a username, a password going in clear text. Anyone listening on the network is going to get it. They'll say, you're right. Let's encrypt that sensitive information. And then everything else they're going to do in HTTP. I'm going to show you why that is bad, and that is going to be a big challenge. What does encrypting your username and password protect you from? Confidentiality, right? In mobile apps, we have an issue with integrity as well. You open a mobile app, I opened the Bing financial app, which is the one I was messing with yesterday. I don't know where it's going. I don't know if it's getting an invalid cert. I don't know anything. All I know is that this is the Microsoft Bing app. And anything it tells me, it's coming from Microsoft, right? And if it's all going through clear text, you can change that. And you can mess with integrity. So integrity in mobile apps is now becoming a bigger issue. Or not bigger, a similar issue. Digital certificates not validated. So even if it does use HTTPS, if it gets an invalid cert and it still sends the data, there's no point in using SSL, right? Like, if it gets an invalid cert, it's still gonna get it. So you need to make sure that not only is it implementing SSL, but it's doing it correctly. Then you can look at authentication as well, and I'm gonna speed it up because I have like 6 minutes left. So basic authentication being used is not good. It's base64 encoded. Anyone that gets it can reverse it quite easily. And mutual authentication. Is there any authentication coming back? You sometimes authenticate the server. Is it authenticating it you? So HTTPS for everything. This was a huge push, and this is not going to be an easy one for many organizations because HTTPS is expensive, right? You have to buy a cert, and no one can tell me right now that it's expensive on CPU cycles because it's not. I mean, it is more than none, but you know, we're in 2014. So with mobile apps, you do need to maintain integrity. If I go to Bing or if I go to an app that's giving me news, I go to BBC News, and I can all of a sudden say that something blew up or the White House blew up because it's all in clear text, because someone's man in the middle of me. I have no idea that that occurred. BBC would then be losing its integrity. So I push for everything to be SSL. Let me just show you on an iPhone app, which was the easiest one I was able to code up before this talk, that doesn't use HTTPS. It sends a request for Facebook stock on a couple days ago, and I replied saying it's at 9 points. If you follow Facebook stock, it's not at 9 points. That would mean it dropped 80% in one day. That would freak you out, right? And you're looking at your iPhone, it's telling you this, but that's not true. It's because it's using HTTP instead of HTTPS, and you decided to connect to a Wi-Fi network, or you're going through some network, because at the end, there's a lot of data centers you're going through that can see your traffic and can modify on the way back, because it's HTTP, it's clear text. So local storage, let's look at that one real quick. And I kind of set you up for this one already. We have the app. I already closed this. I removed the pin from my phone. And this is the part where you want to look at the local storage. So you have to have the SAP file from the developer. You have to sideload it. If not, you're never going to know what's going on this local drive. So we're connecting. We want to see what's there. Isolated storage. You can pick any app. And as you open it, you start seeing things, right? And all of these is the structure, right? This is the structure we talked about. It has, what did we say? Files. There are the files. It has configurations. It has a database. You see that? SQLite. And you can just get that file. You can pull it down, save it to your desktop, and access it later. And you can't do it while the app is running. All right, let's try it again. There we go, it downloaded it to my desktop, and now I can look at this SQLite file. Using SQLite, you can get local storage. You can see local storage. So what you would do is access anything sensitive, and then come in here and start looking at all these files, look at these settings, see if it's caching anything, see if it's storing anything. The same thing for this one. This one doesn't have much. And I'm not on the network. I wanted to show you that last one. But pretty straightforward, right? You get the SAP file, you sideload it. It's the only way you can look at the local storage of the device. Lastly, there's static analysis. So you do require, again, the SAP file without the DRM, so you can open it, and then you have to decompile it. You have to decompile the actual app, the SAP file, to get a code that you can actually look at. I haven't gone this far, but there are a couple of tools that you can use. If you do get to this point, let's definitely work together. There's some free ones that'll decompile your app. A lot of people that code in Windows may seem some familiar, like Tangerine. But you can look at the static code, you can look at the actual source code. Some developers will even just hand you the source code, so you don't even have to decompile it. They'll give you the source code if you have that much leverage, but most of the time, developers won't do this. So with that, my conclusion is Windows Phone 8 is actually pretty secure. It has a complex attack surface. App testing is very dependent on the SAP file. If not, you're only going to see server and client side, which is very similar to your current mobile testing, your current web application testing. The trend I see is many organizations are trying to get rid of BlackBerry because it's expensive for them, allowing BYOD to come in, and Windows Phone might be one of the options they go with. So we're going to start seeing more people having this, and I encourage all of you to take a look at it. And start playing with these apps, see what they do. The one I wanted to show you was the Bing app, that Bing Financial also, just like the iOS stock app, is all in clear text. So anyone using Bing, if you're connected to my Wi-Fi, I can mess with your head until you call your broker about Google going to $10. The last thing, all of this is documented. So when I started, and I mentioned when I started this, there was very little documentation online. So I decided to start putting some out there. Orchilles.com, that's my last name. It's in your little flyers. You can find it. Just search for Windows Phone 8. It's all there. I'll take, I guess, a couple questions. It's 2 right on the dot. Sorry to the next speaker. Any questions? Anyone gonna go test Windows Phone apps now?
Sure.
It's so easy. All right, cool. Anything else? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.